what do I practice, how do I practice, when do I practice, all that stuff. So I wanted to kind of focus on that today, give you some tips. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to share my screen. Made a few notes here. So first things first, when to practice. So this is really, really important, because before you even start thinking about what you're going to practice and how you're going to practice, you really do need to have some kind of a structure for when you're going to practice. All right. Consistency is really key here. So no one is expecting anybody to be practicing, hours a day. Some people like to do that for fun. I know that our teacher, Jimmy, who recently did a master's degree in jazz guitar, he was routinely doing 6 hours of practice a day as part of that master's. But then he's he's a very high level player. Guitar is his main source of income. So for him, obviously, it was very important to get into that kind of routine. For us, it's much more about doing kind of little and often, right? So you don't need to practice very much in a day, as long as you are practicing most days of the week. Now, ideally, if you can practice every day, you're going to get the best results for sure. But, this isn't practical for most people. It's probably a bit more practical at the moment, actually, while there's not a great deal of other things happening. But of course, once things start opening up again and we get back to our lives, there's going to be other things going on, friends and family to see, other activities, holidays, all that kind of lovely stuff that we are all looking forward to. But in general, in a kind of general regular week, we would want to try and practice, if not every day, we want to try and get a good routine going where we're practicing, say, 5 days a week, right? And then depending on your age or your child's age, we normally recommend 10 to 30 minutes a day. So normally for the little ones, for the younger ones, sort of young beginner age groups, between about 4 and 7, we normally recommend about 10 minutes a day. For our sort of junior age students, that's between about 7 and 11. We normally recommend 20 minutes a day. And for our teens and adult students, we normally recommend 30 minutes a day. So it's not much. Most people, even if they've got a really kind of heavy day and a lot of other stuff going on, can find between 10 and 30 minutes a day to practice. And even if you can't do the full amount, anything is better than nothing. So one of our teachers, Jimmy, actually shared a video a few months back where he set up a 5-minute practice routine, right? So even if you can only do 5 minutes a day, it's going to be better than nothing. But it's the consistency that's the key here. Okay, so these are your recommended minutes, 5 days a week. And then if you miss a day, try to make sure you don't miss the next day, unless of course you're on holiday or something, it's not a regular week. But if it's just a regular week, try and set up that practice routine so that if you do end up missing a day for any reason, you can then get back and do your practice the following day. Cool. This is something that I find is very useful and that I recommend to people as well, which is schedule your practice for the same time every day, right? And again, I know this is not always practical depending on how busy your schedule is or your child's schedule is. But, if you know that, say, for example, 5 o'clock every afternoon, right, that's when you're going to do your 10 minutes or your 20 minutes or your 30 minutes. Right, and that whatever else is going on, unless there's some kind of an emergency, that is going to be your guitar practice time. So everything else, homework, playing on the Xbox, chatting to your mates, all of that gets put on the back burner, and you make sure that is your time when you do your practice. And the time of day that is going to work best for you will be different for different people, right? So some people like to do it first thing in the morning. Other people like to do it at the end of the day. Sometimes people will schedule some time in the middle of the day if they're flexible enough to be able to do that. So that's going to be different for everybody. For me personally, I like to get all of this stuff out of the way first thing in the morning, because I know that if I don't, I'm much less likely to do it towards the end of the day once I've been working and I've been embroiled in other things. You know, my head's just not there to do this kind of stuff. I work pretty well on this kind of stuff in the morning before I get into my usual kind of day-to-day stuff. So that's what works for me, but something else might work for you. This is important as well if you can do it. And again, I know this isn't always practical for everybody, but set up a practice area where your guitar is out and your learning materials are there, so that you don't have to spend ages setting up. So again, I know from experience, if your guitar is packed away in its case, and you know your amp, if you've got one, is in the corner of the room with the lead all coiled up, you have to kind of get everything out and set up the music stands, get your method book out. You know, that's really time consuming, and you're going to be, you know, just the thought of doing that is going to be a barrier sometimes. You know, if you're watching something on telly, or if you're playing on the Xbox, or if you're doing something that's more fun, right, the chances are you're just going to think, oh, it's going to be a bit of a faff to get all this stuff set up. I'm just going to carry on doing what I'm doing. Whereas if you've got a little corner of, you know, maybe in your child's bedroom, or maybe, you know, you're fortunate enough to have a room in the house that you can dedicate to this, you know, have everything set up, have the guitar out and on a stand, have a music stand set up with your method book or your songs, or, you know, whatever it is that you're learning, have that there, have everything you need, your tuner, your metronome, your picks, it's all there. So all you need to do is literally just go, sit down, open your book and get started, right? You're going to be much more likely to do it then than if you have these kind of unnecessary barriers set up. So I found this really useful for myself. You can see my guitars in the background there. And I know that it's something that works for a lot of other people as well. And then the last one is put a reminder on your phone. And again, I know that a few of our parents and students do this too, right? So you have your practice time arranged already, you have your practice area set up. All you need to do then is just set an alarm or a reminder on your phone for that time every day, just so that you get that extra little push. So that if you're in the middle of doing something, you're much less likely to forget, and you can go, okay, great, it's guitar practice time, and off you go and do it. So this is all about kind of setting up for success really from the outset. And we do find that the sooner you set this stuff up, right, you know, even if you're doing it, you know, over the first kind of few weeks of lessons, the sooner you set this stuff up, the kind of more momentum you're going to have on the longer journey. All right. Often when I speak to people who are struggling, it's because they haven't, you know, they've maybe been learning for a few months or sometimes even longer, and they haven't got this kind of a routine set up. So this is really, really important. All right, so let's move on. How to structure practice. Now, this is a big one, and in my opinion, right, you should never be stuck for anything to practice, especially if you're working through our method, which is very, very structured, right? So this is our book here, and you will see, in fact, I'm just going to unshare my screen for a second here, so I can show you this properly. So this is our book. This is our junior level 1 book. This is normally for our kind of junior age kids, but you know, the senior ones are set up in a similar way as well. So right at the front of the book, there is a exercise checklist, right? Now, depending on how you're doing your lessons, right, either you or your child, or sometimes your child's teacher, we used to do this ourselves when students used to come to our studio, will tick off what you can do. Sometimes they might add a little note on some exercises that you are working on but that you need to practice, and then of course there'll be other things that will be unticked, right? So your first kind of port of call really should always be to look at this checklist and see what's ticked off, what's not, And generally anything kind of the earlier on the checklist, anything that is not ticked off, they're going to be the priority. So you don't want to be jumping around too much and, you know, going right up to, you know, some of these later exercises if there's a bunch of earlier ones that you haven't got ticked off. Now, obviously at the moment we're relying on our students to do that. Doesn't always get done, but our teachers are making a note at their end. So if you're ever unsure or you want to have a bit of a session just to kind of make sure that, you know, you've got everything or your child has got everything ticked off that they need, you know, we can always book you in for a little kind of, you know, 15-20 minute lesson just to clarify that for you. But that's always the first port of call there. All right. So 10,000 hours to mastery. I'm sure you've all heard that. The idea that if you're doing something, you know, for 10,000 hours, you're going to become a master at it. It's a loose definition, but it's, you know, there's been lots of studies and stuff that have shown across different you know, languages and maths and, you know, whatever you want to learn, really. Like if you do 10,000 hours or something, you're going to get very, very good at it. But it's not, for us, it's not necessarily about the amount of time, it's about how you're using that time. So I've written down here, right, practice smart, okay? And we use a term called deliberate practice, which is all about making sure that you're focusing on the things which are in your what we call your stretch zone, right? So the stuff that you can't yet do, but that you're, you know, you're close to being able to do, and you know, you just need to kind of focus on practicing that stuff a little bit more. Then you can get it ticked off and up to the next level. So again, I know this from my own experience. When I was learning, I was one of those people that I would very often sit down and play just for hours because I really liked playing and it was a lot of fun. And I was, you know, I particularly enjoyed playing with other people. So, you know, I would do a huge amount of playing normally most weeks, but I wouldn't do a great deal of deliberate practice. So I stayed at the same level for a very long time. I got very, very good at the things that I could already do, but there was a whole bunch of things that I couldn't do because I never worked on them. Like I was never thinking, oh, I've got to do this, 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 and this to then be able to get to the next level. So making that distinction between playing and practice is really important because we all love playing because playing is what we can already do and what we're good at, and we don't want to not do that, but we do also want to make sure that we're building in time here to do this deliberate practice the exercises that we find hard, and you know, the more we practice them, the less hard they'll be and the better we'll become, and then we'll be on to the next thing. Right, so I've written a little structure here. This is based on a 30-minute practice session, but you can kind of adapt these numbers for, you know, whatever you want. So, you know, you can cut all of these in half if you've only got 15 minutes, or you can extend everything if you want to do longer than half an hour. That's absolutely fine. So I'm just going to talk you through these very quickly. So first thing is start with a warm-up. We normally recommend that our students do some kind of picking or, you know, dexterity type warm-up. So at the beginning of each level of our method, generally there are a set of picking exercises that we always do in the lessons. These things are things that you can never get too good at, right? Something that people often, or, you know, particularly kids often say is, well, I've already got the tick for that, so I don't need to do it. Okay, but particularly with a warm-up, particularly if it's like a picking technique, this is the kind of stuff that you just get better and better and better at, right? So it should always be the first thing that you practice, because even though, yeah, you can already do it, right? You might already have the tick for it. It's a great way of sitting down. You always know what you're going to be working on you always know what you're going to be doing first. So you always know that you're going to be doing your picking exercises or some kind of a warm up. And usually that's going to be for around about five minutes, just to get you kind of settled into the practice time. Okay. And then again, going back to what I was saying earlier, this is something I think people often don't do, or they don't do enough of. We've certainly seen this with students, which is revision, right? So again, if you can already do something, and it doesn't matter whether it's a song or it's an exercise or it's a piece of music that you've been trying to learn, right? It's really, really, really important to go back and revise over that, right? Firstly, because it's a great way to stay motivated. If you know that you can already do something and you like playing it and you feel a sense of achievement, it's a really good way then, rather than just jumping into the hard stuff that maybe isn't as enjoyable, spend 5 or 10 minutes revising over maybe something that you recently completed or something that you've recently mastered, just to make sure that you're keeping up, the motor skills and the muscle memory that you worked so hard to get to, right? To achieve that in the first place, because the kind of worry is, if you don't do that, you then end up forgetting stuff. So you end up then going through doing more and more things, and then because you haven't been revising, we then end up having to go back and kind of go over and almost reteach stuff that we've already taught you, because you haven't been revising it enough and you haven't been practicing it enough. So you can look here, right? We're 15 minutes in to the practice session. We haven't done anything new yet, right? We've just been doing a little warm up, and then we've been revising over things that we can already do. So, I normally recommend two skills or topics. So maybe you've just completed a reading exercise that you were finding kind of tricky, and it was taking you a couple of months to really get the hang of, and then all of a sudden you get it. Well, don't stop practicing that, because we want to keep that level, we want to maintain that level and make sure that you can still do that, so that then when you go on to do the next reading exercise, you're going to understand it properly, and you're not going to be having to backtrack and go and revise over a bunch of stuff that you've already done in the lessons. Again, this is about practicing smart. So we don't want to be teaching you stuff over and over again that we've already taught you, because you haven't been revising it. Okay. And then of course the next thing is going to be a new skill. Now I've used the word new here, so this could be something, it doesn't have to be something brand new, but it could be something that's just been introduced to you by your teacher, or that you've been working on for a little while, but that you haven't mastered yet, or you haven't got the tick for yet. So again, this is where your checklist comes in handy. You can easily look at that and kind of see what's the kind of earliest thing that you've done or that you've looked at with your teacher, but you haven't yet got the tick for yet. And again, we normally recommend two skills or topics here, but if you want to do more, you can. Remember, this is just a very basic suggestion here. And then in the last 5 minutes here, I've put song or riff. Now, you could, this is kind of where you want to start putting all of this stuff together, and this is where it starts to become a little bit more fun. So you can see I put here 5 minutes, or however long you like, right? You can spend as long as you like learning songs, riffs, melodies, all the fun stuff. So if you want to go, onto YouTube and look up a song that you can play that's been using some of these skills, you can, or you can look at some of our videos that we've made. And you can spend however long you like doing that, as long as you do this stuff first, right? So this is almost like, this is the spoonful of sugar, right, at the end, and this is the medicine, to quote a famous film, right? So, the sugar is like the song or the riff or the fun stuff that you want to do, and this is the medicine, this is the stuff that's going to get you to that point. So you can spend however long you want playing the songs or the riffs or the fun stuff, but just make sure that you do this stuff first. All right, so that's a little bit more about structure, guys. I hope that was useful. And then finally, advice for parents, because, you know, we do speak to a lot of parents, and we know from experience, especially at the moment, because we're all at home and you know, we're not getting to speak to parents face to face. We know from experience that kids don't always pass their practice instructions on to parents, and I'm sure parents, you know this, when your child comes home from school and you ask them what they've done, and you just get kind of a shrug, and you know, so you know, that's why you have things like parents' evenings, so you can get the teacher's perspective on how your child is doing. So the reason I've put this here is because we as teachers, right, we will contact parents if, so for example, if there's a win, so if the child has completed a level, or if the child has, you know, has been really struggling with something and then they get it, you know, we will very often contact the parents to, you know, say congratulations, you know, obviously we send a certificate and a new book for finishing levels, things like that. But you know, we will also contact parents if we've seen you know, a dip in practice or a dip in motivation as well. But we don't always notice that. So sometimes a child can be ticking along, you know, there's nothing to celebrate, but then there's no cause for concern either. So, you know, as far as we're concerned, they're doing well. And then the parent will contact and they'll sound a little bit frustrated and say, I've got no idea what my, you know, where my child is at, you know, what they need to be practicing. And, you know, they'll sound a little bit frustrated. So these are some instructions really, or some tips for parents. And this applies to parents of younger kids, but also teenagers as well. And, you know, we'll really leave that up to you, because obviously some teens are much more self-motivated than others. But a few things that we recommend here. The first thing is to sit in on at least one lesson a month if you can. So you don't need to be sitting in every lesson every week. You know, I appreciate that that's not always going to be practical, but you know, just sitting with your child once a month, just to get an idea of, you know, what they're working on, what's being covered in the lessons. That will give you a much clearer idea, so you can actually see for yourself rather than relying on them to tell you. If you're not able to sit in on a lesson, then, you know, check in with your child's teacher. So, you know, our teachers are set up to communicate with parents, right? They've both got email addresses just for work. They've both got phone numbers just for work. You know, if you contact them at a time when they're not available, then they'll get back to you when they are available, right? So don't feel bad about, you know, texting or emailing or calling at an inconvenient time, because if it is inconvenient for them, they're not going to get back to you until it is convenient. Okay, so you know, you can call or email or send us a WhatsApp. Okay, so you know, just keep communicating with us, especially if there are any questions or concerns that you've got. Okay, next one is, let us know if there are any changes in your child's motivation or goals, right? So if you can see that your child is you know, struggling to practice or struggling to make progress, you know, maybe there's something in particular that they're really having trouble with, let us know. And you know, the same thing with goals as well. Sometimes parents decide that they want their child to do grades, and again, unless you let us know about that, we can't factor that into the lessons. It's not something that we do as a rule. We believe that our method is actually better than doing the grades, although we do appreciate that, you know, there are valid reasons why parents or kids might want to get the grades, and you know, we can certainly accommodate that into the lessons if we can. And you know, things like if they start getting into music and they want to learn specific songs, or you know, they get into a specific band or a specific artist, we love to hear stuff like that, because you know, it helps us then to work on you know, helping them stay motivated and actually teaching them the stuff that they want to learn. Support and encourage your child to practice regularly. Again, I know that a lot of parents don't want to hear this. They want their child to just be really self-regulating with this. It doesn't normally happen, especially with the younger kids, and especially within the first, I would say, 6 months to a year. It's only really once kids start getting some little wins and they start being able to actually do stuff, and they start, kind of recognizing, oh, the reason why I can do this is because I spent, this amount of time practicing it. So it sometimes takes a while for them to kind of appreciate why the practice is necessary and why they're doing it. So we recommend that, for the first 6 months or so, you're really kind of hands-on with that 10-20 minutes practice a day. You don't just expect them to go and do it, because in most cases they're not going to. They're going to need you to remind them, and often they're going to need you to actually sit with them and do it, especially the younger ones. Help make practice fun by playing games and setting challenges. So I did a whole video on this a few weeks ago, so I'm not gonna get back into that again. But you can scroll back down through the Facebook group and find that. And I think it's uploaded onto YouTube as well, but if it's not, it will be soon. So yeah, just to kind of recap on there, really, practice will become more fun for your child once they've achieved some small wins. So playing simple riffs. So, our young beginners love playing things like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and Happy Birthday and Ode to Joy. Older students, we've got things like Pretty Woman, Seven Nation Army, the Peter Gunn riff. There's we've got a whole sheet that's just got like 1-string riffs on it. Another one, Bites the Dust, stuff like that. So we want to try and bring this stuff in as soon as we can, because the sooner students can start to play this stuff, it's going to make the process fun, and it's going to make the idea of doing all of the other practice a little bit more palatable, because they're understanding why they need to do it. And if anybody does have any questions or any other comments on this, maybe something that's working for you that I haven't mentioned, then please do let me know. So enjoy the rest of your Friday, have a lovely weekend, and I will see you guys all soon. Take it easy.